Hi everyone, welcome back to our Histo-PH family, where forgotten Filipino history finally comes alive. Today, we're diving deep into before Magellan. The Rajahnate of Cebu was already powerful, a story that rewrites everything we thought we knew about our beginnings. Everything you've been taught about Philippine history is a lie. They told you Ferdinand Magellan discovered the Philippines in 1521, as if these islands were some empty wilderness waiting for European validation. But here's what your history books conveniently left out. When Magellan's weathered ships limped into Cebu's harbor, he wasn't greeted by primitive villagers living in huts. He was standing before one of Southeast Asia's most sophisticated maritime empires, a kingdom so wealthy and powerful that it had been dominating regional trade routes for centuries before any European even knew these islands existed. The forgotten empire, picture this. It's the year 1500, 2 decades before Magellan. The Rajahnate of Cebu is at the height of its power. Massive trading vessels called Balangay and Caracoa slice through the waters, their hulls filled with gold, pearls, exotic spices, and porcelain from China. The harbor of Cebu is crowded with ships from across Asia. Chinese junks, Siamese vessels, Arabian dhows, and boats from the Majapahit Empire. This wasn't some backwater village. This was the Singapore of medieval Southeast Asia, a cosmopolitan trade hub where fortunes were made and lost, where different languages mingled in the marketplaces, and where Raja Humabon sat on a throne that commanded respect from Japan to the Moluccas. The power player you never learned about Raja Humabon wasn't some tribal chief impressed by European trinkets. He was a shrewd political operator who ruled over a network of allied settlements stretching across the Visayas. His wealth was legendary. When Magellan's chronicler Antonio Pigafetta documented their arrival, he described palaces adorned with gold, sophisticated systems of law and governance, and a ruler who possessed more gold jewelry than the Spanish explorers had ever seen. Humabon controlled the lifeblood of regional commerce, the strategic waterways where Chinese silk met Moluccan cloves, where Japanese copper met Indian textiles, and where the gold from Mindanao flowed through Cebu before heading to markets across Asia. The real Cebu before colonial myths. Let's shatter every myth about primitive pre-colonial Philippines. The Rajahnate of Cebu operated on a complex social hierarchy that would make medieval Europe look simplistic. At the top sat the Raja, a divine ruler whose legitimacy came from both political power and spiritual authority. Below him were the Datu, noble lords who controlled various territories and commanded their own military forces. The Tamawa formed the free citizenry, merchants, craftsmen, warriors, and farmers who owned property and had legal rights. Even the dependent class, the Oripun, had more protections under Cebuano law than serfs did in contemporary Europe. Their legal system was sophisticated and codified long before Spanish law arrived. They had clear property rights, marriage contracts, inheritance laws, and a judicial system that handled everything from trade disputes to criminal cases. Archaeological evidence shows they used a writing system derived from ancient Indian scripts, keeping records, writing poetry, and corresponding with other kingdoms. These weren't oral traditions scribbled down by colonizers. These were indigenous texts that predated European contact by centuries. If you are amazed by our ancestors' story, before Magellan, the Rajahnate of Cebu was already powerful, help us hit our 500 like goal Drop a comment about your favorite fact and subscribe to join the Histo PH family. And don't forget to hype this video. The maritime superpower. Here's what makes the Rajahnate of Cebu truly remarkable: their mastery of the seas. While Europeans were still hugging coastlines and fearing the open ocean, Cebuano sailors were navigating thousands of miles using sophisticated knowledge of stars, currents, and wind patterns. Their balangay boats, with outriggers that gave them unmatched stability, could traverse distances that terrified Spanish galleons. These vessels weren't primitive canoes. They were engineering marvels, perfectly adapted to Pacific conditions, capable of carrying tons of cargo while remaining swift and maneuverable. The Cebuanos didn't just sail, they dominated maritime trade networks that connected the entire Asian world. Chinese sources from the Song dynasty mention trading with Ma Yi, ancient Philippines, as early as the 10th century. By the time of the Ming dynasty, Chinese traders considered Cebu an essential port in the maritime Silk Road. They came for gold, abundant in Philippine rivers, and exotic forest products like pearls, turtle shells, and hardwoods. Arab traders, who had been crisscrossing the Indian Ocean for centuries, also knew of Cebu, calling it the land of gold and pearls. The economic powerhouse. The wealth flowing through Cebu was staggering. Gold wasn't just abundant. It was so common that Pigafetta noted Cebuanos wore massive gold jewelry that would bankrupt European nobles. But it wasn't just gold. Cebu was perfectly positioned to profit from the spice trade that had driven European exploration in the first place. Cloves, nutmeg, and mace from the Moluccas passed through Cebu's markets. Chinese silk, porcelain, and tea flowed through its warehouses. Indian textiles, Japanese copper, and Siamese goods all found their way to Cebuano docks. The Rajahnate operated on a sophisticated tribute and trade system. Smaller settlements and islands paid tribute to Cebu in exchange for protection and access to trade networks. This wasn't simple piracy. This was organized statecraft. Raja Humabon maintained a navy to protect shipping lanes and enforce his authority. He negotiated treaties with other Rajahnates and sultanates. He hosted foreign merchants and provided them protection under his law. Cebu was essentially running a medieval free trade zone, centuries before Europeans would formalize such concepts. The military don't mistake wealth for weakness. The Rajahnate of Cebu commanded formidable military power. Their warriors, armed with Campilan swords, kris daggers, and shields made from carabao hide, were feared throughout the region. They fought in organized formations, used warboats to project power across the archipelago, and built fortifications to protect their settlements. When Spanish accounts describe Filipino warriors, they note their bravery, their tactical sophistication, and their devastating effectiveness in combat. This military tradition would prove itself against Magellan himself. When the Portuguese explorer tried to assert dominance and got involved in local politics by attacking Lapu-Lapu in Mactan, he discovered that Filipino warriors weren't impressed by European military technology. Despite their steel armor and crossbows, Magellan's forces were overwhelmed by a larger force of Mactan warriors who knew their terrain, fought with coordinated tactics, and killed Magellan himself in the shallows of Mactan Beach. This wasn't luck. This was military competence, meeting European arrogance. The cultural sophistication, the cultural achievements of the Rajahnate of Cebu were extraordinary. They created intricate gold jewelry using techniques that modern jewelers still admire. They wove textiles so fine that they became luxury goods traded across Asia. They carved hardwoods into furniture and art that demonstrated advanced aesthetic principles. Their pottery, metalwork, and boat building showed engineering knowledge that rivaled anything in contemporary Europe. Their music, poetry, and oral traditions were rich and complex. They performed elaborate rituals that combined animist traditions with Hindu-Buddhist influences that had reached the Philippines through centuries of contact with the Indianized kingdoms of Southeast Asia. Archaeological finds show they created large burial jars, gold death masks, and jade jewelry that indicates belief in an afterlife and sophisticated funerary practices. They understood medicine, using herbal remedies that Spanish colonizers would later adopt. They practiced dentistry, as evidenced by skeletal remains showing dental modifications. They had midwives, healers, and spiritual practitioners who maintained health in their communities. This wasn't primitive medicine. Many of their herbal treatments contained active compounds that modern science has validated. The diplomatic intelligence. When Magellan arrived, Raja Humabon didn't grovel or submit out of ignorance. He made a calculated political decision. By aligning with these strange foreigners, with their metal ships and firearms, Humabon saw an opportunity to strengthen his position against rival Rajahnates. His conversion to Christianity wasn't naive acceptance of a superior religion. It was diplomatic strategy. He understood that these Europeans might provide military advantage, trade opportunities, or political leverage. Humabon was playing the same game that rulers across Asia had played for centuries, using foreign powers to enhance domestic authority while managing to maintain actual sovereignty. He negotiated with Magellan as an equal, not a subordinate. He hosted elaborate feasts that demonstrated his wealth and power. He showcased his court, his warriors, his gold, and his influence to make clear that Cebu was not to be trifled with. If you're still here, you're one of the rare few who truly care about the real origins of before Magellan. The Rajahnate of Cebu was already powerful, not just the visuals, but the truth behind them. The inconvenient truth. Here's why this history matters and why it's been systematically erased. Colonial powers couldn't justify their conquest and exploitation if they admitted they were destroying sophisticated civilizations. It was far more convenient to pretend they were bringing civilization to savages, enlightenment to the ignorant, and progress to the primitive. The myth of European discovery and Filipino backwardness served colonial interests for centuries. But the archaeological evidence, the Chinese records, the Arab accounts, and even the Spanish chronicles themselves tell a different story. They reveal that the Rajahnate of Cebu was a powerful, wealthy, sophisticated state that participated in global trade networks, maintained diplomatic relations across Southeast Asia, and developed cultural and technological achievements that rivaled anything in contemporary Europe. The legacy that remains. But here's the powerful truth. You can't erase thousands of years of civilization. The legacy of the Rajahnate of Cebu lives on in Filipino seafaring traditions, in the linguistic connections that link Filipino languages to Malay and Indonesian, in the social structures that persist beneath colonial overlays, and in the cultural DNA of modern Filipinos who still carry the entrepreneurial spirit, the maritime courage, and the sophisticated social intelligence of their pre-colonial ancestors. Every Filipino who navigates complex social situations with diplomatic grace is channeling Rajahnate political sophistication. Every Filipino entrepreneur building business networks is following in the footsteps of Cebuano traders who connected Asian markets. Every Filipino who shows resilience and adaptability is drawing on ancestors who thrived in one of the world's most dynamic maritime civilizations. Our ancestors' stories don't end here. They're just waiting to be rediscovered. Smash that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to join the Histo PH family for the next epic chapter of our forgotten history.